Welcome to Reflect on This. Hello, I am Johnny Henshaw. This is the podcast version of devotionals I send to my family and friends. In these devotionals, I share the things I'm learning about the ways and nature of God through applying my study of the Scriptures to the world around me. In the show notes, you will find the complete list of my recommended resources, including helpful podcasts, books that inspired some of these episodes, and ministries that I want you to know about. In the show notes, you will also find something new, a link that you can use to send a text directly to the podcast with your comments and questions. So let's get started. Please join me today as we reflect on this. As I have read this season the Christmas passages in the Gospel books of the New Testament, I have noticed the many times that angels appeared and said, "Do not be afraid." For example, on several occasions, an angel appeared to Joseph, then Mary, and then the shepherds with this message. It got me thinking about how many times this admonition to be courageous instead of fearful occurs throughout the Bible. Doing a quick search, I found over 113 verses with this message. This admonition to be courageous must therefore be important. And why is that? Because the need for courage is a universal need of every human. Chris Valentin had an excellent blog post this past year in which he pointed out this universal need for courage and then offered 3 ways to be intentional about developing courage in our lives. This podcast episode was inspired in part by that blog post. So what are 3 ways to be intentional about heeding God's call to develop courage in our lives? Number 1. Focus on your strengths, not your weaknesses. The story in John 6 of Jesus feeding a multitude of people from a boy's lunch of a few fish and some loaves of bread is a powerful illustration to us of this concept. Jesus multiplied what the boy had instead of focusing on what the boy did not have. In a similar way, God does not care about what you don't have. He only cares whether you dedicate to Him what you do have. The lesson? We should focus on our strengths, no matter how few, dedicate them to God, and not focus on our weaknesses. Number 2, face your fear. In Joshua 1:9, God tells Joshua, "Have I not commanded you? Be strong and courageous. Do not tremble or be dismayed, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go." In this blog post, Valentin reminds us that this admonition from God was right after Moses, their leader and patriarch for the last 40 years, had died. They were in a new land, and they were about to battle cities with inhabitants far more numerous than them. Fear and uncertainty would be a natural response in that moment. Fear is a natural part of life, but it doesn't have to define us. End quote. Fear is not of God, nor has He given us the spirit of fear. 2 Timothy 1:7 says, "For God has not given us a spirit of timidity, but of power and love and discipline." So where does fear come from? Our adversary, the devil. He seeks to devour believers with fear and worry. 1 Peter 5:8 says, "Be of sober spirit, be on the alert. Your adversary, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion, seeking someone to devour." A roaring lion is a good word picture of the schemes of Satan. A roaring lion frightens its prey, and it runs away from the roar, unaware that it is actually running toward the young lions lurking in the tall grass. In that moment, it is actually safer for the prey to run toward the roar instead of away from it, because the roaring lion is usually older, has worn teeth, and is not as fast as the young lions. So, my wife and I like to say that facing our fears is like running to the roar. Number 3, take a risk. Valentin concludes by stating, To be courageous, one must be willing to step into the unknown, to take risks without the guarantee of success. It's in these moments that true bravery is forged. Oftentimes, people will choose to live risk-averse because of the fear of uncertainty. However, embracing courage means shifting that perspective, recognizing that the potential for growth, discovery, and success lies just beyond the fear. Courage is not the absence of fear, but the decision to act despite the fear. By focusing on the possibilities rather than the pitfalls, one can transform fear into fuel, propelling them forward into new opportunities and experiences. Courage doesn't always have to be loud or dramatic. Sometimes it's found in the small everyday acts of resilience and determination." End quote. Acts 18:9 says, "And the Lord said to Paul in the night by a vision, 'Do not be afraid any longer, but go on speaking and do not be silent.'" The Lord was basically encouraging Paul to take a risk and continue speaking publicly about Jesus. Likewise, it is an encouragement to us to take risks for God. Deuteronomy 31:6 says, "Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid or tremble at them. For the Lord your God is the one who goes with you. He will not fail you or forsake you." So, why should we take risks? Because the Lord our God goes with us. Today, I encourage you to reflect on this.